I'm Allison Eyring, organization psychologist, CEO, and endurance athlete. I've spent the last 25 years helping companies solve the people and organizational challenges of growth. I've worked with all types of CEOs and business leaders across the world, but it takes a special kind of leader to successfully grow a business. I call them growth leaders. These leaders have an edge for growth. This allows them to drive performance today while transforming their business for tomorrow while keeping their people energized. So whether you're starting a company or reigniting a team within a large, mature company, I'll show you what it takes to successfully drive business growth through conversations with some of the best growth leaders I know. In this episode, I speak to Maya Hari, Vice President of Asia Pacific at Twitter. Welcome, Maya. Thank you for being here today with me on Growth Leaders.
Thank you so much for having me, Allison. This is wonderful to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here. I can't wait to talk with you about your life, about your work, and about some of the things that occupy your mind here now as the head of Twitter in Asia Pacific. Now, Maya, you grew up in Mumbai. You're one of two children, is that right?
That's right.
Two girls?
Two girls.
So you must have had a slightly unusual family because I understand that you grew up as a mathematician and a basketball player. Is that right?
Well, yes, unusual, yes. We were both girls growing up, but we had a very interesting set of parents, very ambitious, very empowering mom, and a very analytical and fiercely independent dad who wanted the girls to be exactly like that. So it was a very interesting mix of influences growing up. I learned to play basketball. I learned to play cricket. We had a women's cricket team in college. It was fun. I learned these sports very late. I didn't play them growing up, but in college, I learned a lot of these. Nice. It was fun.
Now, and I understand that you are a math Olympiad. What's it like to be in the Math Olympics?
Okay, I have attained some level of Math Olympiad. It's super fun. I have to say the geeky side of me absolutely loved algebra growing up. I would really live for the day that I could do 10 more algebra problems. Didn't have the same love for trigonometry or geometry or any of those. But that love helped me really enjoy Math Olympiad. And it's, growing up in India, it's a competitive country. So
absolutely.
We love competing for everything.
And you are like that is the ultimate geekiness as well. So you ended up studying engineering, is that right, as an undergraduate?
I did. I was debating between journalism and engineering, and we picked engineering. And I would say in part because there was excitement around that space. There was so much growth that could be had. I wasn't sure, though, whether I wanted to let go of the creative side of me, but I really enjoyed both sides. So
and you said we. Was that you and your parents together?
Yes.
Okay.
Specifically my dad.
So that was his
Let's be
influence.
very, very, very clear. It was Dad.
Okay.
And he had a funny story for me. And he said, why don't you go do 4 years of engineering, secure your future, if you will, so you can get a good job, well-paying job. But if you still want, you can come back and do arts after, right? And become a journalist too. I'm like, yeah, that's definitely going to work out for me.
Right. It was a good start. It was a good way to manipulate you into engineering.
That's exactly right.
So you studied engineering in Mumbai.
I did.
And then you went to Utah to do a master's. Was it also in engineering or is it master's in marketing?
It was in engineering.
In engineering. Now, why Utah of all places?
The interesting thing is, once I did engineering, I fell knee-deep headlong in love with engineering. And particularly for a field of engineering, my geeky side coming out again, called signal processing. And Utah was one of 2 or 3 schools that had a very, very good program that helped in the master's side of it. So I picked it, and I'd never been abroad at that point. I'd always lived in India. And I said, it's the States. We'll go. And it was quite an adventure, I will say.
I can't imagine the difference between Mumbai and, was it in Salt Lake?
It was not in Salt Lake. It was up in the north of Utah in the mountains, a little town called Logan.
Oh, right. Very different from Mumbai.
Very different.
Very different.
Yeah.
Now, so you did your master's in engineering, but then interestingly, I don't think you ever really worked as an engineer because your career's been in sales and marketing, hasn't it?
It's true. And I don't think that was intended either. And this is the fun part about how sometimes you go with the punches and see where life takes you. On campus, there was a ton of recruitment going on at the end of the master's program. And there was a recruiter who I ended up meeting from a company called Schlumberger. And he was absolutely convinced that I was born to be someone who could explain technology and that I'd be wasted just being an engineer, even if I succeeded at that.
So it's a good mix between your technical background plus I'm imagining it's a bit of extroversion and interpersonal skills.
That's right. And I think the articulation of taking things that are relatively complex and maybe being able to articulate that to a person that's less familiar with the technology.
Right.
So my first job ended up being, sitting in between the product and the marketing team and being able to take client speak in a complex chip testing environment and be able to translate that back and forth between product and clients.
So that's a really interesting kind of value add that people play, which is to translate from one to another. So I think that's an interesting background of being able to translate very complex ideas into ideas that people can understand and apply.
That's right. And it's as much important as the products, that
themselves.
get built, right? And it's a testament to marketing.
So after you worked for Schlumberger, you went to Cisco in San Francisco.
Yep.
Later, you came to Asia where you worked with Microsoft and with Google. Can you just share some key insights that you gained about leading growth from these organizations?
It's been interesting to see the lens of growth from both the B2B side of technology and the B2C side of technology, but always and predominantly from the lens of Asia. And that has been the most interesting growth story, where the ambitions are big, the canvas is complex, and the most enjoyable pieces have been how do you grow at a very fast pace while dealing with complexity when the solutions are not straitjacketed as much as they tend to be in the West.
Well, how do you do that? Because that's actually very, very difficult to do.
I'm a firm believer and a big believer in hire fast and hire well, right? I don't actually like to trade those two off. And so the choice of the right leaders, the right people in the business who can bring not only functional skills, but something more than the functional skills too, which is being able to deal with complexity, which is be able to think outside of the box or have a higher EQ, dealing with people issues that could be complex. So that extra factor becomes a win factor. Really,
Right.
in businesses like this.
Well, and it's so important, too, because it's so easy to rely on experience, but what one did in the past may not predict what they're going to do in the future if what you do changes.
That's exactly right. And changes every 2 or 3 years. And it also goes back to sort of seeing people who are happy to evolve with that change, right? And are not necessarily comfortable just repeating and doing things they've always done before.
Right.
Brings out very different nuances in talent that we work with in our businesses.
So it sounds like your experiences in both Schlumberger and in tech have really helped you understand how to adapt and then how to take complex situation and make it understandable and simple for people. I'm interested in the fact that after these experiences, you took a role with Condé Nast, which in a way was a move into journalism.
That's right.
So what led that decision?
It was, I call it the sort of dream phase of sort of coming back and embracing all things that I wanted to do. And I genuinely had a parallel part to me that loved design and creativity, which probably were the signs that made me love journalism in terms of language and linguistics as well. And I felt like that was a, unmet need in my career. And so when Condé Nast happened, it was interesting. They were looking for someone to really kickstart and build a viable digital business for them. And seemed like someone had worked for Google before. She must know a thing or two about this. And lo and behold, I was running the digital business and I was employee number 1. So it brought me to a scenario where I had the opportunity to be an entrepreneurial leader, but also had a blank canvas to build from. So, it was a great opportunity to bring two loves of my life, which was the creative side and the digital business side, and be able to put it together there.
Coming up in the next segment.
What's been your greatest challenge as a leader?
To come in, to be able to claim the position that Twitter is in the markets today.
You're listening to Growth Leaders, a podcast with Alison Eyring.
So you were employee number 1 for Condé Nast in India.
In the digital business,
In the
yes.
digital business. What was a key takeaway that you learned from that you were then able to bring to Twitter?
There were 2 segments of learning, really. One interesting piece of learning was, when businesses are so different and you're trying to go through what in effect was a transformation journey, taking a print company and making them a multi-platform digital inclusive company. The ability to hire the right teams that would work in a Condé Nast environment are very different from the teams that would work in a different tech company. And finding that right balance where the teams that I brought in start to look and feel and integrate, even visually, in an oversimplistic fashion, seamlessly with the print company became important.
How do you do that? Because a lot of organizations are dealing with that now with digital transformation. They have to bring people in to build a business. They don't actually know what it's really going to look like, or they have skills, but they're not the same skills. So what have you learned about forming that magical team?
It's the hardest thing to do, but it's also the most important thing to do in my mind. You have to prevent what I call blood transfusion rejection, or organ rejection, if you will. People who are in the traditional part of the business and people who come into the transformative part of the business have to be able to form together and be able to see eye to eye. You need things that bind them together.
Like what?
It could be conversations, it could be a reason to find a common passion, a company marathon that would bring the two groups together. But you need some common binding factors. If
So
you don't
to create a shared culture.
To create a shared culture. And I also found that at Condé Nast, it was interesting because people dressed a very different way than tech, right? So if you think about dressing in high fashion, wearing the it clothes, carrying the it bags.
It's a little different than
It's a little different from showing up in jeans and
shorts.
flip-flops, right?
Exactly.
And none of the digital people we were hiring into the business had ever been in that environment.
Right.
And so the first few employees we had to pick and hire became very critical. They had to be people who visually looked at least
Right.
somewhat like the parent company.
And so which one won? Were they more casual like the techies or more dressy like the fashionistas?
So it changed over time. The first year or two ended up being people who looked like they belonged to the luxury business. And over time, it became so cool to have a blog and to have a following on social media that all the folks from the traditional business wanted to look more like
Right.
the techies.
And it's a great example of allowing the business to evolve instead of what happens so often in organizations where they bring in people from different backgrounds and then there's tissue rejection.
That's right. That's exactly right. And I think some of this is just giving time for that to happen. Then there's no shortcuts there because people need time.
5 years ago, you joined Twitter in Asia Pacific. It was a very different organization, certainly, than it is today. What motivated you to join them?
Twitter has always been a fantastic platform because it was able to connect people and conversations from across the world seamlessly, public, live, and absolutely felt fluid and seamless. And I made my career decisions very often picking companies whose products that I loved to use already. And so Twitter was very much one of them. I was already a Twitter user. I enjoyed using Twitter as a platform. I had a lot of belief in the company and the platform. And so making a move to come and work for this company was super exciting. It was a period of growth. It was a period of deepening roots in new markets. And it was also a period for Twitter of sort of thinking deeply about its own identity as the world of social media and news media around us sort of evolved rapidly. So it was very exciting to come join. It was even more exciting to see what happened after, which was a lot of introspection around our own positioning as a platform.
Well, and it's been so visible how it's evolved.
Very much so. And it was staring us in the face. And it took us a little while to sort of say, what is Twitter all about? We're not social media. We're actually news media. We're a news network in the broadest definition of the word. And what we do is really connect people with what's happening in the world around them. But coming to that point of knowing our own identity that well was an incredible moment inside the company. It was a relief. And it was exciting.
Now, Maya, about 2 years ago, you were promoted, congratulations, to run Twitter for the region. What's been your greatest challenge as a leader?
I took on the role of the APAC leader for Twitter at a time when globally we had a lot of things going on. We were restructuring our business. We had challenges around user growth saturation we were dealing with. And while Asia as a canvas from an audience and from a revenue standpoint was growing, we were not detached from the overall journey and the morale challenges that were going on inside the company. And to me, that was a very, very interesting challenge to take on as a leader, to come in, to be able to claim the position that Twitter is in the markets today as a growth engine for the company globally, but also to be able to take our talent and our people along that journey of being able to say we're proud of where we work today.
Right.
We have such a purposeful role that we play in society, and for us to be able to stand up and be proud of that.
Because I mean,
It's exciting.
I remember that time. There were some very public departures. So how did you handle that as a leader? You came in, people were feeling maybe fearful about the future of the organization. You had faith in it, but maybe everyone else didn't. What was one thing you did that you think other leaders can learn from?
I think it's investing in people, in knowing that they need clarity, they need vision, they need consistency, but they also need to feel in their heart emotionally connected to the company.
So how did you do that?
I think it's a lot of time spent individually with teams, individually with high potential talent, to really know their own motivations and to be consistent and authentic as a leader so that nothing you say is an empty promise or nothing you do is out of sync with the vision that you've laid out for the business. And I think that authenticity and the credibility that you bring to the table counts even more in times when the teams are going through uncertainty. It was an incredible learning, and,
Right.
and I'm very grateful to the teams for really rallying around that.
I'm just out of curiosity, since you are Twitter, can you share any examples of where you actually use Twitter internally for any kind of communications or sharing? Or I'm sure everybody else is curious about that.
Yeah. Well, look, Twitter in itself, because we're all employees of Twitter, we tend to self-select and be a pretty large, high power users of Twitter because we enjoy it. We talk about our platform, so we use it. So oftentimes it becomes very easy to stay in touch with what's happening in other people's lives and worlds because you follow them on the platform. And very often I find that I end up getting to know employees who aren't necessarily in my region, but have a fascinating thing about them that connects me to them, that
it's
we
both
find in common.
So it sounds like it serves a bit as for keeping you informed of what's going on in the world, and also a way of building community with people that you're connected to.
That's exactly right. So we use Twitter as an extension of our other employee engagement tools. And it's a very effective and real-time one at that.
Coming up in the next segment.
And when you talk with your country leaders about building capacity, what makes up capacity?
It's building people capacity, but also building learning capacity.
You're listening to Growth Leaders, a podcast with Alison Eyring.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about growth routines. So
Yeah.
I know you have read some of my book on pacing for growth.
Yes.
And you have so much experience leading growth, which is such hard work. Yeah. Can you give an example of a growth routine, something that you've done that makes it easier for you to drive growth or to be able to sustain growth?
I think driving growth, and you've talked a lot about this in your book, which I've really enjoyed reading, but driving growth is genuinely very hard work when you go through it over an extended period of time. And the ability to sustain growth phase is hard. But this is where the routines that I've put in have really focused on.
Mm-hmm. So tell me what one of them is.
Yeah, two things that I focus on. I know you asked for one.
Nope,
but
you
I'm
can
gonna
tell me
give you
two. You're a high achiever.
Building capacity and constantly building capacity and knowing the right kind of capacity to build is a big focus. And so thinking about proactively sitting down with my country leaders and talking often about how are we building capacity, where are we building capacity, and bringing that conversation almost on a monthly and quarterly basis top of mind, the same way we think about revenue and quarterly settings. That's been very core. I've had to learn it in the tough way sometimes, where our business has grown rapidly and our capacity is catching
Already.
up.
Now, and when you talk with your country leaders about building capacity, are you talking about technology infrastructure, process, people? What makes up capacity?
I think it starts for us from people in the commercial side of the business. It's people with the right skills. So identifying which people and what verticals our business would grow into. But I think right along with that is learning capacity. And this was one that I think came as a realization later to us as a business, that, even if you hire and plan for the right capacity of people to come in, the different needs of onboarding, learning, getting them up to speed, especially when you're hiring swaths of people all together at once, there's not enough peers to be able to take them, like tap someone on the shoulder and say, hey, how do I do this, right? There aren't that many people when you are hiring swaths of new people together. So it's building people capacity, but also building learning capacity, which has been really important in our business.
And for you all, is learning capacity about an individual that can learn fast, or is it about having resources around the organization that kind of help lift up somebody faster?
I think it's the latter, right? And it's been a journey to sort of know, how do you build the resources? How do you build it in a way that it's accessible to the right people at the right time? But also things like in our world, in Asia, language is a big deal. So how do you build those learning resources in different languages? So that's sort of the first pillar of growth capacity that we think about. The second is sort of pivoting from the shorter term needs to thinking about the long-term needs. So one of the rituals that we've put in with my leadership team is once a month, we carve out a meeting called the Thinking Room. And the Thinking Room is got nothing to do with all the challenges or the opportunities that are staring us in the face that need attention now, but rather to think about, in this world where we weren't constrained by the here and now, what are the things we would dream about? What are the things that we would imagine? And to me, these two in parallel sort of keep us aligned to not losing sight of where ultimately we would dream of being, as well as how to make that happen today.
Right. I love that, because your two examples of growth routines are, one is about building the people capabilities so that you can have better capacity, and the other one is really about creating space to build readiness for the future.
That's right.
So I wanted to ask you, in your Thinking Room, is there actually a specific room, or is that just a name that you have?
I want to take this as an idea and build into a new office, a Thinking Room. But no, you have to imagine all our country leaders are in different countries. So it's more the virtual space that we come into together, which is often a video conference.
But I love that. Like, you label it. It's really how you shape culture. Nice.
Yeah.
That's really nice.
Coming up in the next segment.
What advice would you give women who are starting their careers today in tech?
The fear of technology or anything technical is overstated.
You're listening to Growth Leaders, a podcast with Alison Eyring.
You've long been an advocate for diversity in the workplace, and I know that you're also the lead of the Twitter Women team for Asia Pacific. What is your motivation in promoting diversity and also women in the workplace?
Throughout my career at Twitter, I've met such fabulous women colleagues, both here in Asia as well as around the world. And very often, people will ask me for inspirational stories of, how do you do it? You're a mom of two and you sort of have passions outside of work, and yet you're at work here doing what you do. And to me, I found it a bit surprising at first, because I didn't think there was anything different in how I approached life. And I think I sort of stepped back and thought about why other people felt like it was, it felt different. And I went back and I was brought up like a boy, or like I was never brought up like a girl, like a quintessential, my parents and particularly my dad had very gender neutral ways of bringing us up. And so, I have never ever thought to behave differently in society and therefore feel like I had extreme challenges to overcome, right? And I often realized that I've always asked for what I wanted. I've always been ambitious and I've always asked, not always got what I asked for, but if you ask often enough, people know what you want. And so seeing a lot of women around me sort of feeling like what I was going through was somehow different from what they were going through.
So you wanted them to have your experience.
Are we in some ways, and I'm not underplaying the challenges that we have with diversity in the world, but somehow, are we overthinking this, right? And what if we started with a way of nurturing our own kids such that they came into life with less of disparate expectations? So that's how I started. And There's a joke with all of my colleagues at work where they'll ask me a question and I'll be like, should I give you an inspirational answer? Should I give you a real answer?
And which one wins?
There's just, real always wins.
Right, right.
Sorry to disappoint if I'm not inspirational, but real wins. And the real answer is that you cope. Right? Nobody's life, day, moment, meeting is perfect, and you sort of cope.
I always tell people to just learn how to be good enough when good is enough.
That's right.
Don't waste your energy on being perfect all the time.
Right.
There's some times when we have to really nail it, but other times, good enough.
That's right.
That's great. And so what's an example of something that you've done in support of women at Twitter that you feel really good about?
There's a whole host of things we've done, and I've personally been involved with a lot of the mentoring effort to really bring women at the company to have mentors, both male and female, both inside and outside the company.
Do you assign them mentors, or are you just helping them to go out and find mentors?
So inside the company, we actually assign. So there's a more structured and formal process inside the company. But I'm also a big believer in having external mentors because you don't have a very internal company-centric only point of view. It's nice to have the external point of view, and sometimes that becomes a competitive advantage. And so that is something that is more an informal effort on my part to be able to bring the right mentors for people. And people are very generous with their time. A lot of leaders in the industry will do this to give back.
Do you just go and ask them?
I
So
do.
you've got somebody, you want to come be a mentor.
I do. And one of the most interesting ones was when I had to find a mentor for someone on my team in Brazil. And during the first phase of my career at Twitter, I was running international markets, including Brazil. And my network in Brazil is a little weaker than my network in Asia.
It's a little far.
It is. But, you find ways to tap into second-degree connections and things. And there was a lady from a financial institution that stepped up and said, I'd love to. Very senior woman in her space. And the joy and the excitement that I could see my team member have in having access to someone like that and the world that it opened to her was incredible to see. But it's as easy as sort of asking.
Yeah.
Right? And people were very generous with their time.
I think that's great. And it's just a simple example that anybody can try.
That's absolutely right.
Fantastic. You spent your career really, except for that first job, you have been in the world of tech, which is very male-dominated. What advice would you give women who are starting their careers today in tech?
I'd sort of say, the fear of technology, of anything technology or anything technical is, overstated. If women do feel a fear of picking functions that are less technical in our world, you don't need to be that. In fact, our industry is trying to find more and more people who come from liberal arts who come into product management rather than sort of go deeper and deeper down the technology route. So I think first and foremost, assume that it's an even playing field coming in.
Well, and I think the other thing I'm hearing you say is don't assume you have to be a techie or an engineer to go into tech.
That's right. That's right. Well articulated, Alison. Thank you. But you don't have to be a marketeer, or you don't have to be a PR person or an HR person to be in technology. Those are great roles in technology as well. But there are some amazing opportunities within product management and engineering or commercial leadership functions that are exciting for people to come in and be a part of. So it's an inclusive culture, first and foremost. And I think the other thing that I would say is always say what's on your mind and ask for what you really want. Assuming that other people will guess leaves destiny in other people's hands, whereas it's always nicer to control your own destiny as much as you can.
Maya, thank you so much for joining me today.
Not at all. Thank you very much for having me, Alison.
Thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to Growth Leaders wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a comment and a rating. We'd love to hear what you think. If you have questions about growth or growth leadership, please email us at growthleaders@organizationsolutions.com. Growth Leaders is produced by Organization Solutions in partnership with MediaCore. Many thanks to Dee Kirk, Sean Young, Barry Toe, Keith Tan, Zach Rasley, and Susan Eyring.